So much about the...
What would you say if I turned into all the things you love to hate? And on my way comes crashing through the rotten beams and window panes.
Hey everybody, what is going on? And welcome back to the worst podcast ever. I am your host, as always, Dan Brosman, and this is episode 7. VCS and the Amico, we got some news on them. Yet I know all of you guys love hearing about those two things, especially the Amico. One is doing better than the other. Guess which one? And we have the first reports of people's hands-on reviews of the Xbox Series X. And it's looking pretty good so far from what they're telling us. And unfortunately, I know at the time the release of this episode, it's going to be about a week or two. But unfortunately, Eddie Van Halen died at 65 from cancer. What a blow, especially for people that were fans of Van Halen. I am a huge fan of Van Halen. They were my favorite band for years and years. But we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And actually, let's talk about that right now. Kind of starting on a bummer here, but, Eddie was a true rock and roll guy, rock and roll star. All those cliches that you hear about rock and rollers, just partying or whatever. I mean, that was Eddie, man. And just a legend. God, one of the greatest guitar players of all times. And I was lucky to see Van Halen in 95 for the Balance Tour, and that was the only time I seen them. And that was, the Sammy Hagar era. And I'm not I know a lot of people out there are Sammy fans or David Lee Roth fans. I'm a fan of both. I mean, I probably, truth be told, am more of a fan of the Sammy days, but I love the David Lee Roth days almost just as much. But anyway, so yeah, only 65. That's so young. But, he had cancer for, I want to say, about 10 years on and off. Or no, actually, that's not true. Well, I think like 2002, he had been cured of it. And then at some point it came back. Something like that. But, I know that one of the things that Eddie always said is the reason why he got the cancer was because of, the guitar picks that he had a habit of holding in his mouth, and they were made out of brass or copper. I don't know if he really truly believed that, because Eddie was well known for his drinking and smoking, and that started at a very early age. I want to say that from what I've heard, he started doing all that around 12. And, this is coming from a former smoker. Look, that is so bad for you. It is so bad for you. And if I was a betting man, I'd bet the car and I'd bet the house that the reason why he got cancer was from probably the smoking. And, I don't want to sound hypocritical here, but the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life was smoke, and the smartest thing I ever did was quit smoking. So, guys, if you're out there listening to this and you're a smoker, give that shit up, because that is so bad for you. And you know what the worst thing of it is, too? I could totally go for a smoke right now. Isn't that horrible? That's how they get you. It's so horrible. And, for him, that's probably how they got him. I will be honest with you. At that concert, he had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth the whole time. And I remember I was watching a YouTube video where he was giving like a clinic. Eddie Van Halen was giving a clinic at this, I want to say it was a music school. And he was up there, and not only did he look like he was just effed up, whatever he was on, drinking or drugs or whatever, but this guy had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth the whole time. And I think the only time you've seen a lighter was for that first one, because he lit every other cigarette off the last. As messed up as he was in this video, he was just killing it. And it's just really sad to see someone like that. And, you could almost say that, that's what Eddie was, that was the rock and roll, just living for the moment and partying. And, that was just a rock star. And yeah, maybe, but it would have still been nice to see that guy still living right now and healthy. But unfortunately, 65. So when I do start drinking, I will definitely have one for you, Eddie Van Halen. Rest in peace, my friend. Okay, so I guess we'll talk about the Xbox Series X. I don't really have too much to say about this, but I figured I would mention it just for a little while here because, interesting enough, I didn't know they were going to do this, that Xbox gave out review units to some YouTubers and I'm guessing some journalists or whatever that write for gaming. And it's very interesting to see what everyone's take on it was. And it seemed to be really positive. Now, to be fair, I'm not sure that any of these people were actually playing next generation games. It sounded a lot like they were playing Xbox One games, but from what they could tell, everything looked beautiful. And the big thing is the load times. And with these new generation consoles, they are all on solid state drives, which if you don't know what that means, so your computer and these new consoles, or any console as of late, all have hard drives. That's where your memory is, and when you load or install stuff on there, it takes up so much memory. Well, in the past, the hard drives, normal hard drives, have I think it's a couple discs in there that spin, and just like a CD almost, like it's still a disc in there. They're high capacity, but the thing of it with those is that they have moving parts, and they have to be read, and it takes a certain amount of time for them to be read. And not only that, but they are more prone to breaking because, anything with moving parts is probably more prone to breaking. So then they came out with a solid state drive, and it's kind of like when you're looking at other relatable things that are like that would be, maybe like your thumb drives and like your micro SD cards on a smaller, more simpler scale here. So I got to tell you from personal experience with going from a normal hard drive to a solid state drive, it is night and day. Last year, of course, I get the blue screen of death on my old desktop, and I have my friend fix it, and he says, well, your hard drive's bad. I'll replace the hard drive. Do you want a solid state drive? I said, yeah, what the heck? I mean, that's supposedly to be the new thing. Why not? And when he gave it back to me, when it was all said and done, I couldn't believe how fast that computer booted up into Windows. Holy cow. It was, I want to say it was like a quarter of the time to boot up than it took before. It's crazy, and they are a lot quieter. So when all we're hearing about are these load times coming up being vastly less or vastly faster, that comes as no surprise. And it makes me so excited. It really makes me excited for this next generation and going forward, because, this is the next step. I mean, you have your faster processors and chipsets, but then, now this is just another level to making everything faster. But I will say, with SSDs, you are incurring a bigger price. And they have come down in price a little bit, but not a huge amount. And one day they'll just be like any other thing. They'll be very cost effective. But here's the thing. And I guess I really wasn't planning on talking about this, but now that I'm thinking about it, I do want to address this. The thing with, and I'm kind of going off topic here, but the thing with the memory on these systems, why it isn't more. Because with these games being even bigger than they were in the last generation, a lot of people are kind of surprised at what they're saying the size of these hard drives are going to be. And I think most of them, like on the new Xbox and the new PlayStation, I think they're saying that they're going to be a terabyte. But of course, that's not what you're going to have free when you get the system, because you got the operating system and whatever else. Because I can't remember which one they said. You were going to have free like 800 some gigabytes, which in the big scheme of things isn't all that much. Not nowadays. Not with the way these games are. These games are huge. And that brings me to another thing I want. The point I'm getting to is everyone's talking about, is physical media going away, and is digital going to be the new thing? Is it going to be where we're heading to? And in my heart of hearts, I have no doubt that eventually down the line, that's where we're going to get to. But I think a lot of people think that we're going to get there a lot faster than what I think. And hear me out here, because this is what I want to, this is my thought here. So the thought behind, especially the Xbox Series S, the all digital next generation, is how much less it is. Now it's a lot less, not only because it's digital, but because it's not as powerful as the Series X is going to be. Okay? So here's the thing. People are saying, well, that's great. I think a lot more people are going to go for that because of the price and how much cheaper it is. And my thing with that is maybe, but I think they're going to find out relatively quickly how much that's not true as far as that system actually being less. And I'm going to tell you why I think that. And actually, I think it's a worse investment going with that Series S than the Series X with the optical drive media. And here's my reason why. So, number one is, and this is in no particular order, but number one is the cost of games going forward. The longer the lifespan here. When you get a digital game, very rarely are they giving you a discount, no matter how old the game is. And that's one of the big gripes I think a lot of people have with digital games is, every once in a while, whoever you're going through, Nintendo, Xbox, or Sony, they'll have sales. But generally speaking, especially for those AAA titles, they're not giving you much of a break on the price, if at all, for digital. So going forward, people that are only doing digital are going to have to pay full price no matter what. People with physical media that have that secondary resale market where they can go out and buy the disc, not brand new, but used at resale shops or online, off of eBay or what have you, they're going to miss out on that discount because, of course, you're not paying full price for a used copy of whatever on disc, but a lot of times on digital, no matter how long ago it came out, you're paying full price. And the second thing is the memory that these things are coming out with. Now, okay, so you put 1 terabyte on there, but that is going to go really fast, especially if you're 100% digital. And with a lot of these systems, I know the Xbox Series X, you can't hook up an external hard drive to that or like a thumb drive to increase it. It's not like before when you could buy your own specific hard drive and put like a ton more memory on it. Now what you're getting is a cart, kind of like a card or a cart, and it's proprietary. It's like, well, I shouldn't say proprietary, but I mean, yeah, I mean, it's specifically for the Xbox Series X. And I want to say the card that I seen is a terabyte, but here's the knock on that. That is another $200 some they're saying. So that is no small amount of money. So if you want another terabyte on your all digital because you're running out of space fast, you're going to have to pop for another $200, son. So now where are you at on that? Because I think the Series S is what, $200 less than the Series X. So you're right there with the Series X now. These aren't my own points that I made myself. This is what I heard from other people making points. And I'm said, I never really thought about it that way. That is a really good point. Especially when you're hearing, well, it would be better to go with the lesser cost. Now, with PlayStation 5, their all digital is only $100 less, but it is the same specs as the regular PlayStation 5 with the physical media. But the same thing with there. Now, I don't know with the media, or the memory. I want to say that you can do a external hard drive. But that being said, I could be wrong on that. But that being said, I also know that when you go to solid state drives, there's an issue with what kind of external hard drives you can use. Now, I don't really know a lot about that. That's just kind of what I've heard. I haven't really looked into that part of it with the PlayStation 5. But whether that's true or not, and what the issues are, I'm not sure. But if you're looking to buy one or the other, I mean, these are things that you may want to think about. Because I know I want to think about these things. And like my newest console, I think I've said before, is the Switch. And then before that would be the Xbox 360. So with those systems, memory hasn't really been a big issue. Not yet. And that's the thing going forward. When I say I don't think we're as close to going all digital and that's all we're going to get. I don't think we're as close to that as much as other people think. Because when you're talking about memory becoming an issue, especially at the size of these games, I got to think that that's going to be pricey. And I got to think for us to truly go 100% all digital, there's going to have to be a point in time to where the memory becomes cheap enough to where it makes sense to do it. And me personally, I don't think we're there yet. I could be wrong. That's just my opinion. Maybe we are there, but it just feels like we're not quite there yet. Because it just feels like the more memory we need, the pricier these systems are going to get. And that's going to hold back the digital. And that's not the only thing I think that's going to hold back digital. I think the fact that, areas that have poor internet are going to be another reason why I don't think these companies are going to totally get away from physical media, because, there are a lot of areas, and I know around here, I live in the Chicagoland area, but you start driving south and you get out in the middle of nowhere, but cornfields, there's not a lot of good internet in a lot of these places down there, because you're out in the middle of nowhere. You have a little town of like 300 people and nothing. Now, how many people out there are going to really be affected by that? I don't know. But I mean, if you go through the whole country, I mean, it could be a sizable amount of people. And if the only way for you to get games is to download these games over the internet, and if you're talking like a game that's like, I don't know, like 100 gigabytes, that's good. Even on a good like Xfinity line, it's gonna take you a bit, unless you're gonna unhook your system up and drive somewhere to download games. But who's gonna do that? I don't know. Just something that has been going through my mind, and yeah. Okay, so the VCS, as we all know, I am not a huge fan of the VCS at all. I think it is either a cash grab or a good idea gone awry with the best of intentions at the beginning, and then, in the process of making this thing, it's just gone to shit. The more and more I hear about it, I think it's just, a shitty company putting out a shitty product and not really giving a shit. Anyway. So, you get a little bit of news. I mean, honestly, they really haven't given out barely any news in like a year or two, because I mean, all they do is like, well, look at this. I mean, we got the case and this and that. And I mean, it's like, if you really look at it, there's been very little substance to anything. And I think a lot of that's because there isn't anything to report, because this thing really isn't anything. And one of the biggest red flags about what and where this system has just come out. And I don't know how long they've been calling this thing, but it is a gaming / hybrid PC. Now it's just not a gaming console, but also a hybrid gaming console or PC or something like that. But it's like, now they're saying, kind of saying, well, it's both. It's a PC and a gaming console. And it's like, okay, boy, first of all, this thing's like what, $300-400. I don't know what kind of PC you would want to get at that price level, especially if you were going to do some sort of gaming on it or run, modern programs. It's probably, as far as a PC go, if you spend, $400 or $300, you're probably not getting anything that's worth anything. And on the gaming side of things, what are you getting? I don't know what games are coming on this. I know there's a streaming service, some sort of gaming streaming service that I can't remember the name of it, and it doesn't matter, because from everything I've heard, it's just dumb. And it just blows my mind that how many people backed this thing. How many people backed this thing? And I gotta believe it's because of the name. And I gotta look. I've said this before. The Intellivision and Atari VCS, these aren't the original companies, right? Intellivision was part of Mattel. They are no longer. So Atari, same thing. When the video game crash happened in the 80s, Atari became two separate corporations, and then over time it just became a name. And people buy the license to use the name to put on these consoles. Okay? And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that, people do this, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be a bad product. I'm not saying that, but there have been a lot of cases in recent history where that is the case, where people have gotten the licenses for old companies, such as, the all-famous Coleco, and not delivered on what they promised. Whether it's just totally not coming out with anything to backers, or coming out with something that is a total piece of garbage. And, I know it's, hey, if you want to back it, that's fine for the VCS, but I really hope for these people that backed it. I really hope for their sake that this thing comes out and proves me wrong. But I got to tell you, I don't think that I'm going to be wrong. And this supposedly is going to be shipped out soon for the original backers. I think it's like 1,000 units. And I am really, really interested to see what it is they get. And that as far as the outside, because we know what the outside looks like. It doesn't matter. But like, what's on the inside? What games can you play? Now, I know that they said, well, they're going to put, I think 100 preloaded Atari games on there. But Jesus, man, you can get that anywhere. At Games, they sold those flashbacks, and even the later ones had HDMI, and you would have, I don't know how many games on there. They're all Atari games. I have a whole bunch of Atari games on my Raspberry Pi. There's a million different ways to play those games without having to spend $300-400 to do it. Because it's not hard to emulate those games. So when they said, well, we're going to pre-install those on there. And of course they have the license for Atari. So any Atari games, they have access to. But I mean, that's the only thing I've heard about. Those pre-installed Atari games and the streaming gaming service. And if you want to count that Tempest 2000 or whatever that was supposedly being developed for it, but the developer had no idea what they were talking about deal, and the demonstration of it shown on TV wasn't actually being played on a VCS but on a computer. Okay, let's just say that we include that too. So now we got maybe a Tempest game and 100 preloaded Atari games and the streaming service. Does anybody think that adds up to $300-400? I don't think so. And I think this is going to be just a shit show when this comes out. Or maybe not. I mean, to be honest with you, my expectations are so low for this thing, it might actually surprise me. Because the bar is set so low. But then you have the Intellivision Amico. And I know that, it kind of sounded like, the last time I talked about it, it kind of sounded like I was being critical of it. But more of that, I was just kind of thinking out loud to myself and trying to figure it out. And I think the Amico is vastly a different animal than the VCS because they do have games for it. Okay, are they mobile games? Are they, exclusives? I don't know. Yes and no, and who cares? But at least they're coming out with something on this machine. At least we know there is truly the hardware, and we know there is truly the software on this thing. And, I guess the only thing that worries me is like this new video that came out from a television with Tommy Tellerico, and he's doing this, showing it off and showing the lights, the LED lights on it. And it didn't sound like they were selling it towards consumers, like people that, hey, you should buy this. It sounds like almost like they're getting someone to invest in this, to give them money to keep going on this. That always makes me nervous. And you've seen that on the VCS, where they ran out of money or they hadn't paid people that had worked on it, and then they got sued. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's the case for Amico, but it makes me worried, because as much as maybe I wasn't interested in it, I kind of am, because I am a television guy. I grew up on it, and it would do nothing more than please me to see this thing succeed. And we all know that, it was supposed to have come out actually, this past weekend, but that got pushed back until like March or April, I believe, or May, somewhere in the springtime. So I think, let me just say this, at the very least, I think what the people that are backing the Amico, I think what they're going to get is going to be vastly better than what the people that backed the VCS are going to get. It just, like I said, it's not going to be hard to look better than the VCS. So I think a television, I don't know. I don't know if people are going to see it this way, but I think they're coming out with that at the right time, because after the VCS, you could put a Raspberry Pi in a case and run a whole bunch of different stuff, and it's still going to look better. But and then that brings me to another thing I want to talk about. That kind of relates to this, and I think about this a lot, because in recent years, there are so many different crowd-funded projects for gaming systems for the retro scene. Some good and some bad, and sometimes you get something that for your money, and sometimes you don't get anything. And as much as I'm dumping on the VCS and kind of can't believe that people would actually, buy into this thing as far as with their money, and maybe even with the Amico finding, that thing's $299, kind of find that a little bit expensive. On the other hand, I understand, and I think that in a certain way, it's good, because the thing with crowdfunding projects is it's a gamble. It's a gamble. You never know how it's going to end up, because a lot of times it's going to, from the initial time they kick off the crowdfunding, and especially if it's Indiegogo and they don't need a prototype. Because on Indiegogo, you don't need a prototype. On Kickstarter, you do. But from that time to the completed project, it could be quite a long time. I bought into Polymega, and we are going to get that next month. And it's been, I want to say, a good 3 or 4 years on that, as far as when they first started talking about it. Now, the pre-orders came, I think it was like maybe a couple years ago. But the thing about it, that where I like to invest in some of these projects every now and again, is because I want people to keep trying to make stuff like this. I don't want that to go away, because I think it's good for the retro community. I like seeing people try to invest in new hardware and new stuff. And yes, a lot of times it's a pie in the sky thought. There was that, what was it? That one CD-based game or CD-based system, that CD or something, that Metal Jesus reviewed, but ended up being like an orange pie shoved in a case with a CD drive, a disk drive, that ended up just turning out to be kind of sketchy and failed. And I know there was something else that about 2 or 3 years ago that John Hancock had invested in, had backed. And it was like, it was something like powered by a Raspberry Pi or an Orange Pi. And he could not get that thing to work. It finally showed up. And, I can't remember how much it cost him, but it's a gamble. It's a gamble. And the only thing going forward I can say is that as we see more of these Kickstarter projects, these crowdfunded projects, the more we see of these things and see the path that they take, the more streetwise I think all of us get from that. Because before, we didn't know. Like, all this stuff was new, and we hadn't seen where all these other things had gone. So now we're getting more of a feel, more of the ebb and flows of how these things can go. It doesn't mean that something we may think that looks good at the very beginning is going to be legitimate in the end. That's why I say it's a gamble. But at least now we were able to make more of a informed decision, we get that gut feeling on knowing, be like, yeah, this doesn't feel like the way that other thing went that didn't turn out so well. This to me feels like it's okay. And I just want these people to keep going for this. Because I think it's good for the retro community. And I think it's just interesting as all hell. There's plenty of things that I've seen that, I've been interested in, but just haven't invested in. Because, there's only so much money to go around. But I mean, you also run that risk of, a VCS or a retrocade and getting screwed big time. And I think for everybody, you got to find that line in the sand there that says, you know what, this looks interesting. This is how much I'm willing to fork over and, throw into the pond here and risk. Am I going to get something that's worth that money back, or am I just going to get shafted? And I know a lot of people say that, they got to give that money back. But, a lot of these times at the end of these projects, there ain't no money to give. And a lot of these projects actually go for like a second round of pre-orders just to get more money to keep going in the development, part of things. So, I mean, I know I'm kind of rambling here, but it just seems like there are a lot of projects out there to be wary of, but, don't let that scare you away from other things. If you see something that you really are interested in, right now, the Polymega is going to come out, and I think that's going to be maybe the first CD-based system that we've seen. And now, they didn't do crowdfunding. They did something, I don't think they did crowdfunding. I think they just did the pre-orders themselves. They didn't go through Indiegogo. They didn't go through Kickstarter. I think that was all of them. But I'm excited. I'm excited for this. This is the first real big thing that I've backed. And, once I get it next month on my YouTube channel, I'm going to do a review on it. I'm going to do an unboxing. I am super excited about this thing. And I hope it's everything that I want it to be. And I think especially with all this hardware, this new stuff coming out, that it's so important because these older systems, they're getting older. Obviously, older systems getting older, but they're few and fewer. They're working less and less. You can get them fixed, but sometimes that's pricey because if there's no one close to you, then you got to send it out. Blah blah blah. And I like these new systems, and I think. And the funny thing is, I think that the retro scene is going to go all digital way before the modern stuff goes all digital. That being that there's not two systems, one for physical media and one for digital. Because, look at I know I've said this 100 times, but I got a RetroPie sitting here and I can fit every single game 16-bit and under, I can fit almost everything on there. And that's pretty much where I've stopped putting on there. I haven't gotten anything past the 16-bit. But, even going past that, I know PlayStation's becoming a lot more easy. I know like Dreamcast and Saturn, those things, you're able to fit like the whole library on these things now. And that's great. Of course, I don't want to get into the whole, is it legal and is that piracy? We've already had that discussion. I don't want to, re-step over that or rehash that old issue, but I think it's great because as far as game preservation, it is so great. I say, you got that rare game out there and it's expensive. Man, dump that ROM and make it public, okay? Because, the people that own the rights to these things, and here I go. I said we weren't going to get into it, but the people that own the rights to that, and they don't want to make a physical copy, they're not selling it again, or they're not selling it at present, or they don't have any plans to, well then, cry me a river. Let's get a lot of people out there with copies of this so it doesn't get lost to the sands of time. Why not? Man, I'm getting all worked up here. Really am. But that's okay. It's fun. This is what we do the gaming for. I love walking through and being able to play all these old games. All these classic games that if I would have had to set up when I was younger now, like of 12-year-old, 13-year-old me could see what I got now. And what the technology is. If I gave me, my 12-year-old me back then, a little box, and I said, plug this into your TV, and you'll be able to play every Nintendo game, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Atari game. It's all on there. You can play it all. It all fits on here. It would have blown my mind. Just think about it. And maybe you're too young. Maybe the people that are listening to this, the few of you are a little bit too young to remember those days, but I do. Okay, pre-internet. And to have something like that back then, man, that'd be the first thing. If I ever get to go back in time, if I get a time machine, the first thing I'm going to do is give myself the winning lotto numbers. Okay, that's number one. But number two, I'm going to give myself a Raspberry Pi here. And then, I'll have to give it a HDMI to RCA converter because, HDMI wasn't a thing back then. But God, can you imagine? Okay, well, I don't know what the point of all that was. I just went off the rails, went off-roading there, and that's where we ended. And I think that's where I'm going to end the podcast today, folks. I didn't really have too much to talk about. That's kind of the reason why this didn't come out last Friday, because it's like, well, I don't really know what I want to talk about right now, because I think you always hit that part of where the new systems are getting ready to come out and not a whole lot's going on with the last generation. So we're kind of in that neutral zone area, that limbo, to where you're just waiting for that new stuff to drop. And then you're going to have stuff to talk about. Hopefully. All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in once again. And I hope you enjoyed this episode and my ramblings. And I will catch you later. Good day and good night.